Senator from Ohio.
First, I thank my colleague from North Carolina for his thoughts, and we are on the cusp of a vote here on legislation that would dramatically change the way we conduct our elections in this country. As my colleague said, are all elections perfect? No. But I got to tell you, I'm really proud of what we do in Ohio. We make it easy to vote. We also make it hard to cheat, and that's the right balance. This bill, S1, is called the For the People Act, but what it actually does is it strips away control from people in Ohio and elsewhere to be able to write election laws in our own states and centralizes that control here in Washington, D.C. That's not consistent with the Constitution or the Federalist Papers. In addition, some of its proposed changes attempt to undermine the First Amendment rights that we hold so dear as Americans. I'm proud of the way we conduct our elections in Ohio, in part because we've got high turnout. In fact, we had record turnout last year, and that's great. And I don't want to leave it up to federal employees here in Washington, D.C. to determine how our system should work in Ohio, which is what this legislation would do. I mentioned the Constitution earlier. It gives the primary power over election administration to the states. It's very clear about that. It also says in Federalist 59, which is Alexander Hamilton, who was the guy most interested in these Federalist issues, he said, it is clear that the federal government should only get involved in very extraordinary situations. Last fall, 5.97 million Ohioans cast a vote. That's a record, as I said. And it represented 74% of eligible voters in Ohio. Despite that, and despite the challenges of running the largest election in our state's history during an unprecedented pandemic, we ran what was widely reported on the right, on the left, by the media, as a secure and successful election. In fact, I think the most successful election we've ever had. Our state-run, bipartisan county boards of election with 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans in each county were able to do that because they know what's best for Ohio, and they're held accountable. But this partisan bill claims Washington, D.C. somehow knows better. S1 strips the power from accountable, democratically elected state representatives in my state and around the country to determine congressional districts and hands that over to a federal panel, again, staffed by unelected, unaccountable third parties, and a computer program. Again, I think it should be something that is part of what elected representatives are held to account for, is how we draw our congressional districts. It mandates the controversial practice of ballot harvesting. I don't like ballot harvesting. I think it makes it easier for partisan operatives on both the right and the left to conduct outright voter fraud. It would force taxpayers to fund the political campaigns of candidates they don't support. It turns the Federal Election Commission into a tool of whichever party controls the White House. So instead of being even, it would actually be lopsided and be partisan. It seemingly contradicts the 26th Amendment by forcing states to let individuals register to vote as early as 16 years old. And then it could allow those 16 or 17-year-olds to vote by banning state voter ID laws. The vast majority of Americans support voter ID laws. It's a fact. Republicans, Democrats, and independents think you ought to have some sort of ID when you come to vote. But this bill bans that safeguard. I could list other serious flaws with the proposal, but the bottom line is that this legislation has been presented as a safeguard for democracy when it actually contains some radically undemocratic provisions. I'm in favor of state-level common sense efforts to increase voter confidence in our elections. We absolutely should do that. We need to protect democracy by ensuring, again, that people know it's easy to vote, it's accessible. That's good. We should all want that. But we should also make it hard to cheat and be sure we have security in our elections so people know they have trust in the system that their vote is going to count as it should. Again, that's what we do in Ohio. I don't think this legislation furthers those objectives. Instead, I think it would amount to a federal takeover of our election system, which has always been in the domain of the states. Our government is built on a carefully constructed framework of checks and balances, including between the branches of government. I cannot support legislation that would run so counter to what the framers of the Constitution intended and the election system that works well in my home state of Ohio. I yield back.